Hello, my name's Emma and I do communications and coordinate the training at Stronger Kent Communities, also known as SKC. For those of you who don't know, at SKC we offer support and signposting to voluntary and community groups through our website resources, coaching and skilled volunteering services, and our online training programme. Having supported many charities, we know that insurance is a hot topic. Some have never considered it necessary, others have been confused by the terminology and the number of different policies on offer, and others are simply looking to get a good deal with a trusted company. So we've joined forces with BHIB Charity Insurance and hope our partnership will help you resolve some of these issues. So over to Luke Perkins for today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Emma, for the introduction. Yep, so today, hopefully, we're going to make the introduction to insurance a bit more simple and easy to understand. Really, the session is going to be just covering a high-level overview of the basics, and then obviously, if we've got any questions, we can answer those in a follow-up session, or we can take things offline, and you're welcome to contact us directly. So just to go through, we'll be speaking for around about 10 to 15 minutes. So like I said, a real quick short session that will allow us to go into kind of each individual parts of an insurance policy you should consider. We'll start off with who BHIB Charities Insurance are, what does your insurance policy cover, and then equally the individual insurance policies that you should consider within that wider insurance cover that should build your total package. So just a quick introduction to BHIB Charities Insurance. We've been trading for over 50 years as BHIB Insurance, and we have over 2,500 individual charity customers that we look after throughout the UK now. So very much a specialist. We've been doing it for a number of years. We really do understand what a charity needs and what insurance policies they should be considering. We work with Aviva, one of the largest UK-based insurance companies, alongside a selection of others to help build your insurance quotes. We do also offer an online quote and buy system with a dedicated website under the name of BHIB Charities Insurance, which you'll be able to find lots of useful articles that we also share with SKC and guidance and free support such as risk assessment templates, which we'll mention at the end of this, which are completely free to use and download whenever you like. On that website, we'll also include details about potential funding opportunities that we work with insurers on, one of which is the Aviva Community Fund, which is a very useful opportunity to link up with an insurance broker like ourselves to help have access to insurer-led funding. Like I said, we have a dedicated website which hosts all that information, which are links on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. And then lastly as well, we have a dedicated charity specialist, specialists on the phone ready to speak to you. Myself and my team look after the charity side of things. So no big call centres, you can speak to the same person, friendly service. And realistically, what we want to achieve through this session is just to make sure you feel comfortable and you're able to make educated decisions when considering your insurance policy and try and help make things a bit easier to understand. So to start with, what should an insurance policy cover? Now, when we talk about, in our world, insurance policies, it is a commercial combined package policy. So that means that a package policy should include your public liability, your employer's liability, buildings and contents insurance if you require it, and then you can attach other insurance policies as well within that. So you just have one big policy that covers all these additional parts of your operation. And before we get into the detail of the presentation, I just want to clarify, when we say charities, we actually mean any not-for-profit community group or voluntary-led group. You don't have to be a registered charity to buy insurance policies from us or for yourself. It's just a catch-all word that we tend to use. Now, when you sit down to decide to pick out your insurance policies, it is important to follow a bit of a very simple process, because a lot of people do put off the process of speaking to an insurance broker because a lot of the groups that we speak to are volunteer-led, and no one wants to make a mistake when being a volunteer. And it is quite a big responsibility to buy the insurance. However, working with someone like us, we can guide you through the process and ask you the right questions. But for yourself, the first thing you should do is step back and look at what you do. So look at your charity description, not the one that you use on the Charity Commission website if you are a registered charity, or in your constitution. Help us understand exactly what you do, what your day-to-day activities look like. Once we have that, the charity description or the organisation's description will be used on your insurance policy. And then in theory, the insurers should say, okay, anything to do with that description is covered under your insurance policy because you've told us and we've accepted that we understand what you do. So having that description is vitally important, and making sure it does cover everything. And it can be longer. It doesn't need to be a couple of words or just one sentence. And with ourselves, we can build a paragraph to help really paint that picture and let the insurers know and help them understand what you do. The second step, once you've understood what you do and how to communicate your activities, is to look at what you own. So any equipment that you own, or property. Sometimes charities do, or organisations do, own buildings that they lease out as well, or even just equipment that you have. It could be something as simple as a gazebo that you use when you're doing various different stalls at events, or stands that you have, or maybe you've bought a couple of different laptops or iPads to use with your service users. Anything like that, really, that should all be covered, and you want to protect what you own, on the basis that you might not have that money to replace it. You've bought it once, you've used charity money to your income to buy those pieces of equipment. If they were to go missing, or to be lost, damaged, or stolen, then you might not have the funds or can justify the spending of that money again to replace that equipment. Rely on your insurance policy to help you out there. And then finally, step 3, to finish off the scope of what your insurance policy should cover, is you need to look at who you work with. And I don't mean just the service users or the beneficiaries of your organisation and who you're trying to impact. We also include volunteers on this as well. So you work with them to help deliver your aims and objectives of your organisation. And you are responsible for them. You are responsible for their welfare, and they're responsible for their activities. So if they act in an inappropriate way, you're the one who, in a way, by a volunteer, you do unofficially employ them in some capacity. So it's important to make sure that you understand how many volunteers you have, who your service users are, and how many you work with, and what kind of events you're setting up, and who's going to be at those events, and are you going to be out in the public? Are you going to be interacting with members of the public that you also need to be mindful of? And then also, if you are lucky enough to have employees as part of the organisation, those are vitally important, and that's a legal requirement for you to have. So I've mentioned already a couple of different insurance policies or covers that you need to consider. I'm conscious that people say, oh, I need public liability, or I need certain elements of insurance because you've been told to get that from a building that you're using, or a venue that you're hiring out. But we want to make sure that people understand what that is, what is the need, and how does that policy work. So for us, public liability, in essence, this covers you against accidental injury to third parties or damage caused to third party property. Now, you might be saying, well, who is third party? The easiest way to kind of look at it is, if they're not a volunteer and they're not an employee, then they're a member of the public. Even if they're a service user, they're still a member of the public, even though you know them, and you know them by name, and you work with them. They are a member of the public still, and that's where that policy would cover. Now, you also will be told, or you asked to provide evidence of this insurance policy, and someone might say you need £5 million worth of public liability cover. Well, a lot of people come to us and say, I don't know what £5 million is. It's such a vast amount of money. Well, it does include defence costs. So, for example, as a claim could be, is that you may be serving a cup of coffee to one of your service users as an afternoon tea gathering. You knock that coffee over them, it ruins their clothes, and they receive burns on their legs, for example. If that individual then engages with a solicitor, an accident in a public place has happened, and they want to raise a claim against you, you'll want to have a solicitor representing yourself to be able to defend against another solicitor's letter. And the public liability covers you for the legal defence costs incurred, so you get legal representation, but then also the injury, if it was to go to court, may be applied to a payout to say, you know, they've had life-changing injuries, or they've had to have time off work, or they've had to have rehabilitation costs, depending on how dangerous that is, or how big the accident was. And, you know, a cup of coffee over someone's leg, hopefully you'd imagine it can be a lot smaller, but we do see large claims, you know, members of the public being seriously injured, a broken arm, a broken leg, and that can be quite common. Something as simple as you having a meetup, you want to do a presentation, the charging cable for your laptop is across the floor, and then someone trips over that because it wasn't taped to the floor. They fall over, break a wrist or break an arm, and then they can't work for a few months because they have a labour-based job. You know, that's all stuff that would incur costs, and that's how the public liability policy would come into action to help defend that claim, but then also potentially pay out for their loss of earnings or their, yeah, and that kind of thing. So hopefully that brings public liability into the understanding of exactly what that is and what it actually covers. Moving on to the next slide, which is for employers' liability. The name of it doesn't help. It doesn't just cover employers' liability. It does also cover volunteers. And when we say volunteers, it doesn't have to be someone who's a registered volunteer with you. It can be someone, you know, at an event, and you've said, "Oh, could you help marshal this car park and direct the cars in?" Something kind of unofficial capacity that all of a sudden you've asked someone to do something to help you run the charity or organise an event. And then all of a sudden you are legally responsible for them, or you have a responsibility of their care because you're asking them to do things. Now, the official kind of explanation is it covers employers for costs of compensation claims resulting from their legal liability to employees for injury, illness, or disease sustained at work. In essence, if you're working with a volunteer or an employee, you ask them to go do something, move that table or lift that box and pack away this room and put it onto shelves. You didn't tell them how to lift the box safely, or they shouldn't be doing it by themselves. It's a two-person job. They then receive a back injury. You know, a couple of weeks later, you might not even realise at the time. You then get a letter from one of those solicitors saying, "Oh, injured at work." You know, we've seen those on the daytime TV adverts. And then you'll want to have legal representation again from yourself if you do receive an unfortunate letter like that. And with this policy, that's exactly what it covers. So you have legal representation and legal cover included within the policy. And then if it does go to court and there is an injury or illness sustained at work and it is proven and there's a cost involved, the courts award a cost against you as an organisation. You know, you shouldn't be spending charity money to defend those costs. That's why you outsource that part of the risk and transfer that risk to an insurance policy, and that's where it's covered. So this is a legal requirement in the UK with some exemptions, but we won't go into that as this is just an entry kind of information part of it. Like I said, volunteers are covered within employers' liability. It's normally a very wide scope definition of what an employee is. So when we say employees, we mean volunteers, marshals, assistants, you know, part-time, full-time, it doesn't really matter, but each policy is different. So I've already given an example, but another good example is, say, for example, if you're a trust working in the local environment, doing community research into wildlife, and you send a volunteer out into a field to take some samples or to monitor go to do a survey and understand, you know, what the local litter's like in a community. That employee then trips over, or that volunteer trips over in a field in a pothole. You didn't carry out a risk assessment. You didn't give them pre-warning to say, "Oh, just be careful here. You know, we know it's quite uneven. You know, are you okay on your feet?" And you haven't done any checks to make sure that they're able to volunteer in that way. They then fall over, break an arm, become seriously ill. They cannot work. Then that goes to court, and then there's a loss of income. But under the employer's liability, you have the legal representation and potentially pays out for any awards brought against you in the courts as well. So hopefully that kind of brings that into an easier way to understand how wide employer's liability can actually be. And then the third core cover really is buildings and contents insurance. But when I say buildings and contents, I mean any assets that you own as a whole. So the easiest way to explain what contents insurances is if you have your office or your venue that you work from, or your home as an organisation, anything that you tip up, if you tip upside down the building, anything that falls out would be covered as content. So computers, office equipment, any stock that you have, even if that is donations of stock or fittings such as shelving, racking, sports equipment, telephone systems, laptops, documents, everything like that would be covered under content. And then whatever's left up in that upside down building would be classed as buildings. So walls, roofs, outbuildings, fences, fixed machinery, glass, artificial playing surfaces, car park paths, the very kind of fundamental bits that don't really remove from a building very easily. So that, and then within the content side as well, we'd also go in and say this is where you could cover things on an all risk basis. And what that means is that's the items that you would take away from the property. So things like laptops or exhibition equipment, stands and stools, those kind of things, tablets, iPads, all of those things would be covered via the contents policy, and you would separate that out for a separate amount. Now, we understand that not everyone, not all organisations are lucky enough to have their own buildings that they own, but sometimes you are required to insure these via your lease that you sign. But then equally contents, even if your contents are old or they were originally donated, we always ask the question is that you might have, say, £5,000 worth of desks and chairs and different contents like that, which is fine. They may have been donated. You may not actually ever spent that money, but if anything happens to yourself in the building, there's a fire, you'd want those items replaced, and finding the money from the charity accounts may be hard. Rely on your insurance policy. Even though it's a small amount, it could mean quite a lot to small organisations. So we do kind of stress the point to even cover those small things, because in a worst case scenario, you'll have to find that money to replace those items to help you carry on after the event. And that kind of brings a conclusion to the very, very entry levels of what insurance policies you should consider as a small organisation, and even as a slightly larger organisation. We wanted to make sure that it was easy to understand and make sure that it is a very simple kind of process to buy insurance or to start the conversation of insurance. And how we really help is that we can provide useful insights and guides and resources like this webinar, but on an article-based format to help you understand what you need. We're available on the phones as well, so you can give us a call or drop us an email. But we also help to have access to the funding opportunities, such as the BHIB Community Fund, which we say get in contact with us and we can help you and guide you through that process. And we've also got the free risk assessment templates, which is also on the Strong Kent Communities website, which Emma will take you through in a moment. But then also, if you do want to have that, you can either email us or email SKC, and we can start sharing those guides and documents with yourself and help you locate those on the various websites that we have between us and SKC. So hopefully you found that useful. So I'll pass back over to Emma in just a couple of seconds. But as a summary, essential insurance covers public liability, employer's liability, buildings and contents, as we discussed. Additional covers that you should look to consider in the future: trustees indemnity, professional indemnity. Cover your trustees, so if an accusation is made against them for not acting correctly or if they've made a mistake. Or professional indemnity if you're providing advice or professional services or professional opinions to individuals, such as how to access different services, or how to complete a form for benefits, for example. And then things to consider in the future: cyber insurance and event insurance if you are going to events or you want to organise your own event when things become better. So hopefully you found that useful, and thank you very much for listening. Emma, I'd just be happy to pass over to you to close the session.
Brilliant, thanks Luke. It was a really good presentation to get us all thinking. But we would like to invite everyone to our charity insurance Q&A on October the 8th. This will give you a chance to ask your burning insurance questions to Luke, either based on today's webinar or just insurance questions in general. And the booking link is up here, as you can see. It's the one at the bottom. So it's on Eventbrite, 101insurance.eventbrite.co.uk. So you can book your free place there. And if you would like to find out what BHIB Charities Insurance could do for your organisation, contact us at contact@strongerkentcommunities.org.uk, or you can click on the partnership page we have on various pages on our website, including the human resources page, and the link is along the top there as well. So we really look forward to seeing you on the 8th, and thank you very much for listening. Bye.